Long after daylight had yielded to the haunting glow of twilight, I found myself standing before a desolate field that seemed locked in eternal decay. The stagnant air felt thick with dread and history, as though each blade of grass was bowed under the weight of bygone horrors. The setting sun painted the remnants in dark reds and bruised purples, transforming what was once a proud battlefield into a realm suspended between the living and the dead. Torn banners clung to splintered lances, half buried in the blood-soaked earth, their colors muted by passing decades. Rusted helmets poked out from the ground like skulls, offering silent testament to the countless fallen. The wind was eerily still, yet an almost imperceptible whisper carried the echoes of long-forgotten war cries. I felt them swirl around me, cautioning me to turn back before it was too late. No living creature dared call this place home. The earth was barren, the distant tree lines gnarled and cast in a milky haze. Endless rows of corroded weapons jutted from the soil. Spears, axes, swords like skeletal fingers grasping for vengeance. My heart pounded as I advanced, each step a betrayal of self-preservation. This was not a place one visited willingly. It was rumored to be under the dominion of something neither living nor dead. Tales passed down by traveling merchants and wary villagers spoke of a restless spirit, a ghostly swordsman who roamed the battlefield at dusk, forever challenging wandering souls to a final fatal duel. I had heard the rumors many times before. They said he appeared at the darkest hour between sunset and true night, raised his blade to the heavens, and demanded tribute in the form of mortal courage. Any soul caught crossing the field at this unholy hour was bound to accept the challenge or face consequences far worse. Some believed he was the spirit of a noble knight betrayed in the final chaos of war. Others insisted he was a remnant of dark magic, a summoning gone wrong that forever tethered him to the land where his summoner had died. No one seemed to know the truth, yet everyone agreed on one point. The swordsman's black-armored figure with hollow eyes and a blade set to drink life would ensure no one left that plane without a confrontation. My reason for coming was rooted in a mixture of desperation and curiosity. Personal tragedy had left me stripped of purpose, grieving a life I once thought secure. Stories of this spirit who offered duels to the brave, an entity rumored to grant one final wish or insight interested me. Some said if you defeated him, he would grant a boon of unmatched value. Others claimed if you were found unworthy, you would join the legion of souls trapped beneath the soil. Fear and logic told me to avoid this cursed terrain, but heartbreak and the promise of redemption lured me forward. So I pressed on, among twisted remnants of armor, stepping gingerly over remnants of lives lost and bones reduced to dust. Early twilight cast scarlet and indigo ribbons across the sky when I reached the heart of the field. A solitary hill rose, crowned by a dead oak whose brittle branches clacked in the windless air. I felt a chill slither up my spine as an otherworldly silence engulfed me. Even the faint rustle that had followed me from the edges of the battlefield seemed to vanish here. The ground felt colder, harder, as if the earth itself resisted any warmth. My breath caught in my throat, each exhale forming a ghostly mist. For a moment I thought I heard a muffled sob from somewhere within the gloom, but as I turned to listen, there was nothing. Only the heavy hush of a place divorced from life. That was when I saw him. Just beyond the oak's withered trunk stood a figure clad in tattered black armor. His gauntleted hand rested on the hilt of a long sword. Dull metal plates bore the scars of countless battles, each scratch a testament to ferocious clashes lost to history. His face was obscured by a helm with two narrow eye slits, from which a faint greenish glow seemed to leak. It wasn't the pale light of reflection or the glimmer of a hidden lamp. It was an unnatural luminescence, the mark of a soul chained to the realm of the long departed. He stood motionless, as if carved from the grave itself. I took a tentative step forward. The plates of his armor groaned as he raised his head ever so slightly in acknowledgement of my presence. My pulse thundered in my ears. It occurred to me then that I might have ventured too far into a fate I no longer controlled, yet something in me needed to see this through. I steadied my trembling hands. "I come seeking you," I managed to say, voice unsteady. The figure tilted his head in silent question, the edges of his helm catching the dim light. When I thought I might have to speak again, the wind awoke, circling us both. Its gust was cold, so cold it seared my lungs. Deep from within that black helm came a voice that rattled with centuries of disuse. "You are here," it echoed, low and haunting. "And so shall your fate be decided." The figure took one step forward. I watched as a faint mist curled around his form, the restless essence of souls trapped at his side, or perhaps condensation from a decay-laden wind. He surveyed me. Though I couldn't see past the darkness of his visor, I felt the intensity of his stare. It was like a primal force, peeling back layers of resolve to see if I was worthy of this confrontation. Behind him, the sky darkened in violent colors. Crimson clouds drifted overhead, as if the heavens bled for the battles once waged below. Shadows lengthened, and from somewhere in the dark came the clink of chainmail and hushed moans of spectral warriors. My body tensed at the possibility that others might be lurking, disembodied soldiers who sprang to attention at their master's summons. Yet all I truly saw was him. The swirling darkness around his shape seemed too thick to be natural. It felt as though the battlefield itself clung to him, a macabre veil. "I do not fear you," I lied. My voice quavered. The swordsman's silence, his stillness, unnerved me more than any threat he might have uttered. Then, in a deliberate motion, he drew his sword from its scabbard. The blade glinted an unnatural silver, like moonlight struck from the depths of a mirror. As he raised it, I noticed something horrifying. Faint human shapes, like anguished faces, rippled beneath the steel surface. A sudden wave of dread washed over me. This blade, this cursed weapon, was no ordinary sword. It was a vessel of trapped souls, a ledger of every life he had claimed. "You have come to offer your life, or prove your strength," he intoned. The ghostly voices beneath the blade seemed to surge at his words, as though these imprisoned spirits too thirsted for my essence. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but there was no lightning. "Cross blades with me, and release my tormented spirit, or condemn yourself to join my endless vigil." As he finished speaking, he lifted his free hand, beckoning me forward with a slow, dread invitation. My mind spun. Could I really fight this entity? I was but a mortal, with limited skill in swordsmanship. My own training, gleaned from wandering mercenaries, would hardly equip me to face an eternal revenant of war. Yet I had come here for answers, for something that might restore meaning to my life. To back down now would render my pilgrimage pointless, leaving me haunted by regret. With trembling hands, I touched the hilt of my own sword, a worn family heirloom. As I drew it from its scabbard, the blade showed none of the ghostly enchantment of the swordsman's. It was simply steel, etched with dust and memory. His posture shifted. He raised his blade in a traditional salute, an archaic gesture of respect among warriors. The hush of the battlefield intensified, like an enormous breath being held, as I moved to match his stance. For a moment, our shadows sprawled outward, stretching far into the gloom. Then he lunged. The speed was inhuman, a blur of black metal. I barely deflected the strike, steel crashing against steel, sending a clang reverberating across the silent plain. With a twist of my wrist, I spun away to avoid a second blow, though the tip still grazed my arm. A sharp sting and the wet warmth of blood signaled a narrow escape. We danced in a deadly rhythm, exchanging blows that sang through the twilight. Each strike from his blade seemed to draw power from the souls within, and each time I deflected, I felt a tremor resound in my bones. I lost track of time in the frenzied movements. Minutes could have slipped by, or entire hours. The hush of the battlefield was intermittently broken by our clashing swords and my ragged breathing. The ghostly swordsman moved with uncanny grace, pivoting on a single foot as though weightless. His eyes, or what lay behind that helm, remained fixed on me. Desperation fueled my strikes. I aimed for joints in his armor, the small gaps where steel overlapped. He evaded with a dancer's poise until my sword finally found purchase near his shoulder. A soft glow erupted where my blade bit through metal. It flared brightly and then vanished, leaving no blood, all a swirling mist. The swordsman stumbled back as if the blow had indeed hurt him, but rather than gasp in pain, he released a hollow, rasping laugh. I saw the glow in his visor intensify, fueled by an indefinable fury or perhaps a distorted glee that I stood my ground. Suddenly, with a single step, he closed the distance between us. I felt the chill of his presence grip my neck before I realized he had disarmed me. My sword flew out of my hand, clattering far across the battlefield. He raised his blade to my throat. A flicker of savage triumph danced within that spectral gaze. I prepared for death, shutting my eyes for a moment, steeling myself for a final blow. Instead of the fatal thrust, however, he paused. The tip of his sword pressed a cold line against my skin, drawing a trickle of blood. Biting down panic, I opened my eyes to see him looking at me intently. "You fight with purpose," he hissed, and his weapon lowered a fraction. "But is that purpose sufficient to carry your will beyond death? I sense your anguish. You face me with courage, yet I feel the sorrow that burdens your soul." The swirling shadows around us seemed to stir as he spoke, as though responding to his words. I struggled to catch my breath. My knees trembled. In the choking silence I answered, "I came seeking some vestige of hope, something beyond mortal understanding. I thought—" My voice caught in my throat. Could I bare my heart to this creature of shadows? The notion was absurd but strangely compelling. I thought, if my soul were truly tested, I might find redemption. Something shifted in the swordsman's stance, a subtle lift of the head. "Redemption," he repeated. A dull sound, almost like a sigh, emanated from him. The blade at my throat receded another inch. I have known many who sought redemption on this cursed ground, fools and heroes alike. None found it here. Only the dead remain, and the living who dare test themselves against ghosts. He paused, lightning flickering somewhere behind the clouds, though no thunder followed. "But you are not yet undone. Summon your sword. Show me if your strength is more than fleeting resolve." His words reminded me of my lost weapon. Summon my sword? My instinct was to scramble across the field. Instead, a sense of calm overcame me. I looked over my shoulder where my blade lay half buried in the dirt. An unspoken force seemed to flow through me, and I lifted my hand, willing it into a state of focus. To my astonishment, the sword quivered and then slid across the broken earth as though pulled by invisible hands. When it reached me, I gripped its hilt with renewed vigor. Pain throbbed through my limbs, but adrenaline and a strange new determination fueled me. The eerie glow in the swordsman's visor brightened. "A will strong enough to move steel," he observed, the metallic echo still chilling. "Perhaps you have potential after all." He raised his own cursed blade once more. No more words were exchanged as we merged again in deadly dance. Each slash he delivered tore at my endurance, and with every parry I felt shock waves tingle through my arms. Sparks showered the field, illuminating the silhouettes of shattered weapons. The darkness grew more oppressive, as if night itself crouched on the edges of the battlefield, thirsty for spilled blood. My breath came in ragged gasps. Time lost all meaning. I lunged, putting every ounce of strength into a downward strike, but the swordsman diagonal throcked it. Our blades locked, and we stood face to face, his ghastly visage mere inches from mine. A swirl of mist eddied around us, the lamentations of the dead spiraling in our ears. It was at that moment I felt something deep within my chest shift. I was losing. My muscles threatened to give out, my knees buckling under the unrelenting force. With a final push, I was sent staggering backward, collapsing onto the earth with a hard thud. He stepped forward calmly, sword lowered in conclusion. "Your determination is commendable, mortal," he said, "but your body fails you." As I lay there panting, I saw the ghostly faces waver within his blade, snapping their phantom jaws in anticipation. The swordsman lifted his weapon. A sense of utter defeat overwhelmed me. I braced myself for the end. Just then an unexpected flash of light, brighter than any torch, burst behind him. The swordsman flinched, half turning as a luminous form of a woman materialized. Clad in spectral armor with a broken crest upon her chest, she appeared sorrowful and resolute. Her presence cast a pale silver radiance that made the swordsman's darkness recoil. She raised a translucent hand toward him, sorrow etched into the lines of her feigned smile. The swordsman froze, the glow in his visor flickering as though confronted with a memory. His blade trembled. A hush fell. Then she spoke, her voice a gentle melody tempered by centuries of regret. "My love, you wander still." The swordsman stiffened at the phrase. Rage, confusion, longing, emotions seemed to flicker within his cursed form. She continued, "The fields are silent. The war is ended. Release yourself from the chain of vengeance." A faint breeze stirred her ethereal hair and she moved closer, her hand outstretched in beckoning heartbreak. "Ilisand," the swordsman whispered like an echo from a tomb. The tension radiating from him was palpable, his blade lowered almost reflexively. "You fell. You were taken from me. Her apparition wavered, shimmering under the weight of her sorrow. "You linger because you cannot accept the brutality that robbed us of our final moments, but your endless duels bring no solace. Each life you claim binds you tighter to this haunted ground." She glanced in my direction, offering an apologetic dip of her head. Then she faced him fully again. "Lay down your sword, Garel. Let us both be free of this torment." I witnessed him reel as though confronted by an unseen blow, his free hand clenched into a fist. "I have battled for centuries, awaiting vengeance," he murmured. The swirling shadows around him receded, revealing plates of dented armor and centuries of misery. He looked to his blade. The faces beneath its surface moaned, their eyes hollow with despair. Slowly, as if every movement pained him, he reeled back and released the weapon. It clattered to the ground, the shrieking echoes it once commanded, fading into a faint hiss. A wave of energy rippled across the barren field. In that moment, the illusions of haunting war cracked. Figures of spectral soldiers shimmered and faded, ranks of rotting cavalry, pinned to the battlefield by centuries of resentment, dissolved into glowing motes of light. Geralt sank to his knees, rivulets of green luminescence leaking from the seams of his armor. Elisandrith drifted closer, kneeling beside him, her face layered with compassion. "You did not need to keep fighting," she said softly. "None of us did." For a few long seconds, I remained prone, too stunned to move. The rotted stench that drowned the air sapped into the earth. The metallic tang of old blood seemed to fade. A hush enveloped the plain, one not born of terror, but of peace. The swordsman's body shimmered with a gentle light that replaced the dreadful aura. Elisande placed her ghostly arms around him, and in that embrace, the two began to fade together. Before they disappeared entirely, Geralt turned his gaze toward me. The glow in his visor no longer felt threatening, but rather tranquil. "You sought redemption," he said, his voice free of the metallic distortion. "By standing your ground, you helped me find mine." A faint glow within my chest burned, and his final words carried through the hush. "Honor your life. Do not waste it, as I have done." Then with a glimmering release of power, the two spirits dissolved into the dying twilight. The cursed blade on the ground shattered, its fragments dissolving into motes of dust that the wind gently scattered. All around, The field lay quiet. Bit by bit, a warmth returned as clouds moved aside to reveal a half-moon in the sky. In that pale light, I could almost see the grass, parched and gray, regaining a slight tinge of its former green. If only for a moment, it looked as though the battlefield and the countless souls bound within had finally found serenity. I collapsed onto my back, gazing up at the sky, tears stinging my eyes. Exhaustion flooded every fiber of my being. My wounds throbbed, but the sensation was strangely distant, overshadowed by the relief that seemed to roll over this once accursed land. My thoughts drifted to those who had spoken of the ghostly swordsman. Would they ever believe the tale of how he was finally set free, not by another sword, but by a specter's whispered plea? Perhaps tales of his haunting would fade into legend, or perhaps they would live on, cautionary and grim, reminding travelers of the price of unbridled wrath. I dragged myself upright, leaning on my sword for support. A new day had not yet dawned, but the darkest hours seemed to have passed. My breath was ragged, my limbs shaky. Yet I felt a sense of purpose, a slowly kindling spark of hope in my chest. My attempt at redemption had led me to an unexpected miracle. I had tended in some measure to the spirits who roamed this forsaken domain. Perhaps I had also mended a piece of my own soul along the way. As I made my way across the silent field, I passed relics of battles lost to memory. What was once a tangle of resentful ghosts seemed incredibly still, even peaceful. From a corner of my eye, I thought I saw fleeting figures, men and women dressed in ancient armor, smiling, offering nods of camaraderie. Then they faded into the night. Despite my weariness, my heart felt momentarily lighter, as if unseen hands guided my footsteps and assured me of safe passage. I continued until I reached a familiar cluster of broken spears, where I had first entered. Emboldened, I turned to look back once more. The center of the battlefield was bathed in silvery moonlight. The old oak tree swayed slightly in a gentle breeze. A small swirl of dust rose from the spot where Garal had surrendered his sword. Moonbeams glimmered across the field, reflecting off battered helmets and shattered shields, granting them an ethereal beauty that contrasted sharply with their violent past. A hush lived there, but it was no longer menacing. It was the hush of a final reprieve, a lullaby for the weary dead. I remembered his final words, "Honor your life. Do not waste it." They rang in my ears, almost like a vow I was meant to uphold. I thought of Elisande, the gentle dawn that broke Garel's eternal night of bloodshed. Their love transcended the horrors that trapped them. If they had faced the cruel blade of war and found each other again, beyond death's boundary, then perhaps my own heartbreak would not damn me to cyclical despair. I clenched my sword in renewed determination. I was leaving this cursed field alive. Stepping beyond the threshold of twisted armor, I found I could breathe more easily. The shadows receded, and distant stars blinked above me. Though the night was still deep, the horizon hinted at the faintest promise of dawn. I hoped that the next time someone recounted tales of the battlefield's ghostly swordsman, they might speak not only of terror, but also of the compassion and unbreakable bond that finally ended his vigil. Perhaps those who came after me would only find a quiet field, one more silent memorial of war among many, untainted by restless spirits. With a final glance at the silent plain, I murmured a silent prayer, gratitude for my life, sorrow for those who had perished, and reverence for a love that refused to crumble. The wind carried away my whispered words. I thought I heard a soft echo of farewell, like a contented sigh from the land itself. Turning my back for the last time on that lonely battleground, I walked toward the future, stepping from shadow into the faint glow of a better tomorrow, resolved to honor both the living and the dead through whatever deeds my path might require. I did not know where I would go, Perhaps I would find a place where I could rest, dress my wounds, and gather my wits. Or perhaps I would wander on, guided by instinct, forging a new destiny in a land unburdened by ancient grudges. But as the stars sparkled overhead, I carried within me what I had sought all along, the possibility of renewal. In raising my sword against a phantom night and witnessing the final mercy of love, I discovered a spark in the darkness. And though the future remained uncertain, that spark was enough to lead me forward with a steadier heart and a mind no longer lost to grief.